fandom?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Fandom is your obsession with TV, movies, comics, and books.
Fandom is debating whether or not Goku or Superman would win in a fight. Clearly, it's Batman.
Fandom is about liking things. Join us weekly on Fandom as we talk about all of that and more. Subscribe at fandompodcast.com.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be
the owner of a comic book store.
Trust me, true believer. Well, Jagger and me, we had a running contest to see who had the most comic books in the world.
Whatever, my escape was comic books.
Net profit to me, negative $59.
I love the comics because of the brightness displayed by the fellows who drew them. They remain with me always. And when comic books first came into being, it drew me to them.
Tales from the Comic Shop.
Hey, welcome to Tales from the Comic Shop, the show that invites you to take a peek behind the counter. I'm your host, Joe, and today I'm joined by Eddie D'Angelini and Roger Prowse. How are you gentlemen doing?
Doing great, thank you.
Yeah, I'm Roger Prowse. I am with the Nerd Store in Salt Lake City, Utah, and more recently, I'm teaming up with some of my retail friends to start Brain Dead Comics, which is a comic variant company where we're focused on bringing, great lesser-known artists from other mediums and platforms, as well as some of the best-known comic artists in to do really unique and covers for books that we're excited for.
Great. And I'm Eddie D'Angelini. I'm the co-owner of Heidi Ho Comics and one little cog in that Brain Dead as well.
All right, awesome. I'm just hearing about Brain Dead, so I look forward to hearing more about this project as you
We announced our first book today. So go look at the cover because it's really cool.
What is it?
It's a Power Rangers book, which I'm not really a Power Rangers guy, but this art for this book is really good. So yeah,
I may have seen that cover actually floating around in one of our chats or two.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm really excited for this one. And this artist that we're working with, he's very well known in the fine art community, but he hasn't really broken into the comic world. So this is the chance to get on the ground floor of a really, I think, really talented artist that has a lot of potential and future in this medium.
He paints a nice picture.
He sure does.
All right, well, let's hop into the news. So we got a lot of news to get through this week, folks. To start us off with, Sunday I saw the White Knight Presents Harley Quinn preview. I know that White Knight is an Elseworld story, so I know this isn't canon. And honestly, with Harley, who cares about canon? She has like 5 origins already. But they made her a stripper. And I am kind of wondering if, with her mental health background issues and just her general character, I don't know that I find that to be the most appropriate job for her. I'm not trying to demean sex workers or say I'm anti-stripper, but it's just for what Harley has come to represent, especially in the last 8 months with her show popularity. I don't really understand this decision creatively to make her exotic dancer, stripper, go-go dancer. And I know on the page it differentiates that she's a go-go dancer, but when they have a big panel of her spinning on a pole, which is pretty indicative of stripping and less to do with go-go dancing, in my opinion. I don't know if you guys have an opinion on this at all.
Well, could it be, Joe, that they're maybe trying to give her, in this Elseworld story, this is not, regular continuity, but in this Elseworld story, is it possible that they're trying to give her an occupation that kind of more reflects the kind of female empowerment that she's come to represent now that she's pretty much a character broken away from the Joker?
Well, that's an interesting take. One of the problems with that, and I'm kind of ambushing you here with this because I didn't tell you, is Joker's tipping her at the table, and she, in the introduction, it's basically an introduction to her one-shot issue. She's taking credit for making the Joker into the Joker. So she's saying that she's responsible for the Joker becoming the Joker. And
Interesting.
She's just stripping her way through Chaos School.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, she literally said, that's the other thing. It's so cringy. She actually says, I'm working my way through med school. That's a C movie line right there. But yeah, I just want to get my thoughts on that out there. They're not maybe fully developed at this point, and I'm waiting to read the whole thing. It comes out on Wednesday. Another issue I have with that is, White Knight is comic book for the conservative Batman fan. Even from the name, the name is a shot. It's a derogatory term used against more liberal people on the internet, the term white knighting. And, Sean Murphy, who writes it, is very libertarian, conservative, and he's made that very clear on his social media and in the stories he tells. And I haven't read the second White Knight, but the first White Knight is very good. Despite these predilections for me, which go against my sensibilities, the first White Knight is still very good. I just don't quite think that he is the writer to be bringing you stripper Harley Quinn either, though, for these reasons, because of the negative stance that his political leanings have taken against sex workers, especially in the last 4 years.
I don't know if I have an opinion on this, because I'm not a huge Harley fan. All I know is if you're going to be paying your way through medical school, you better be stripping or selling drugs or something that's bringing in that kind of cash, because garbage collector or dog catcher is not going to do it.
Because selling drugs is far less criminal than the interest rates charged by student loan companies. As far as this whole issue is concerned, I don't really care. I mean, honestly, I'm not a big Harley fan, so maybe that's part of the reason why I don't care. But also, like, it's an Elseworlds. I'm not going to make that big of an opinion out of one panel. I'm going to wait to see what's fully done with something before I, make an opinion out of it. And I mean, it's a little cliche, but dude, like, so many things that are awfully cliche that happens in creative media all the time. So, I mean, I'm probably going to cringe less at that than every single time somebody uses the dialogue "maybe, just maybe" in a book.
All right. Well,
so that's just me.
So you guys have some strip club stories you want to share, apparently, to go along with this topic. So have at it, Eddie.
Like I said, mine is, I think, funny yet kind of wholesome in a way. When I was getting married, my friends took me out, and I told them beforehand, I don't want to go to a strip club. It's not my thing. I don't care. Just don't take me to a strip club. Well, we went out to like a couple places, drinking and just having fun. And when I was properly sauced enough, they decided, okay, let's take them to a strip club. It didn't last very long because we got in. I immediately started berating the women on stage, basically saying, my wife's better looking than you. My wife's got better tits than you. My wife's got a better butt than you. And then it got to the point where they realized we better get them out of here. So there
and
you
how
go.
Hammered were you at that point?
Pretty hammered.
I would imagine.
Pretty hammered, but yet still in love.
All right, Roger, what you got?
So Comics Pro this year, this was back in February, we're in Portland.
Portland, home of the
and I'm so basically I'm there. We had the CBLDF fundraiser auction, which you buy a bunch of cool rare stuff. We had bought some CGC books and some other unusual oddities and stuff, and so we had it all in our hand, and we went outside where a couple of our buddy retailers were hanging out, also a publisher and an owner of a publishing company that's pretty well known, I won't name, but we were hanging out with them, and they said, oh, hey, are you guys coming out with us tonight? And we're like thinking, we're both like, yeah, we're hungry, we could go for a burger at a bar, like, what the hell. And so the guy that we're with is another retailer out of California who was kind of in the dark as well, and they said, well, we're going to Union Jack's, and I'm like, oh, that totally sounds like a pub. And so to someone not from there, that sounds like a pub. And I'm like, we haven't eaten. I know you guys haven't eaten. I'm assuming and I asked the guy I'm with, like, hey, what is this place? He goes, I don't know. I think it's a bar. We're like, okay, cool.
It's Union Jack's. You're going to get some bangers and mash, right?
That's totally what I expected. So Well, so anyways, we end up at the place, and of course, it's not a bar, and I'm the only one with the cash, so I pay everybody's cover fee that's in the car with me because none of us knew where we were going, and we meet the publisher and the other retailers there. So it's my brother and myself and that other retailer that were in the one car, and now I'm kind of like, well, I'm kind of stuck here because I don't want to just like turn around and leave because I'm making him go because he's our ride now. And so we get into the club, and first off, the girls come by and hit on me, and I just look at them and say, "Guys, I got no money. Go do your job somewhere else." Which they're actually very appreciative when you're just straightforward that way. But it doesn't take long before they're ignoring us, and I notice that they're playing Indiana Jones on the TV. And so my brother and I are awkwardly in the corner by ourselves. Charles is gripping a handful of CGC comics, and we're both staring at Indiana Jones, just awkwardly, like in this stuck between the doors the strippers come out of the whole time. And then we talked to our friends later that owns the publishing company, and he said he was out smoking and talking to the strippers. They asked him what he was in town for. He told them a comic convention, and they said, "Oh, are you with those guys that have the Ninja Turtles shirt and a stack of comic books in their hands?" And they both embarrassingly said yes and admitted to being with us. So that is the time I accidentally ended up at a strip club.
Oh God, I've got a horrible Union Jack story that I'm definitely not sharing publicly.
See, and you were actually supposed to meet me that night, Joe. That was the night you were supposed to meet me, and you canceled because you were sick. So you could have warned me.
Yeah, I would have just taken you to the Acropolis, because that's the strip club that is also owned by the guy who owns the largest butcher warehouse in Oregon. So you can get yourself like a super like cheap like New York strip or like T-bone for like literally like $8 for like a T-bone steak full dinner with like a baked potato and like. So yeah, that's Portland. Portland, where we have the most strip clubs per capita of anywhere in the world.
Hooray!
So,
Yeah, well,
enough
now
being embarrassed.
I know to Google before I go.
Enough being embarrassed by my home state. So let's talk about something really embarrassing and a black eye for the comic industry. DC has parted ways with Midtown and UCS. Just before we started recording, you guys showed me that Lunar's going to do handling the distribution for all your DC comics, but your shop's going to have to order $500 per order before they're willing to ship.
In just DC.
In just DC. I mean, I don't think my shop orders $500 per week in all books.
No, that's per month. That's per month.
Oh, that's per month?
That's also $500 at wholesale, not at retail.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's going to be close to $1,000 plus in retail, depending on what your discount's at.
Right, yeah. But that's per month, not per week.
Right.
Oh, okay. But so I don't understand then, because they ship weekly.
They do, but you order, generally your orders are put in each month, your initial orders. So you order each month for the entire month. You're not ordering week for week. Although right now with DC, a lot of shops, including myself, we're still kind of doing week per week because we're kind of like, catching up with everything and doing it like FOC. Yeah, you order per month. And then you start getting them out, like in 2 months from when you do your initial order for the month is when you start getting them out, like every week, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think I follow you.
Yeah, but
so what does this mean though?
Okay,
for retail shops,
it's pretty devastating for smaller, especially smaller isolated stores.
Yes.
If you're a small store in a small town, especially, this is going to be a real hard thing to navigate because there are small stores that are definitely not going to be able to hit that limit and still make money. Now, my store, and I would assume probably Eddie's store, it doesn't mean anything. We were well over that point anyway, so it doesn't really affect us. And for some stores in larger markets, they might find if they have friends that are other retailers being able to pool orders and things like that, some logistics and a little more pain for them, but it's still doable. But I know where I actually live is not near my store. I'm in a small town in Idaho where I live, and in my town, the local store that's here has announced they're no longer carrying DC Comics because it's a small town. They're a single location store. They just simply can't.
Yeah. See, that's the problem is, you think, oh, it's easy enough for these smaller shops to just team up with another shop and kind of go in together. But a lot of these small shops are the only shop in their small little town. I know.
But also not easy. That's still significantly more work, and it also relies on your competition being friendly with you, which not every market that
Exactly.
happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a rare thing. So this is definitely going to be a struggle for the smaller stores in small towns, because I can speak from experience of a particular store that I know. My wife's, I forget what the family lineage is, whatever, but somebody within the family or family friend owns a comic shop in her hometown in Hanford, California, which is a small city in Central California, and they're the only comic shop in that area. Pretty much, outside of Hanford, it's all farmland for miles and miles and miles. So you'd have to drive a long way to get to the next town. So they're pretty much it. So they've got no one to team up with. And I know for a fact that they would not hit the limit or even get close to it. This is a shop that when you walk in and you go to the rack of the new comics, as far as DC goes, they're pretty much going to have maybe like a couple of the Batman titles, maybe Superman, maybe Wonder Woman, maybe Flash, and that's about it. So there's no way they're going to hit that limit. So they're going to be one of the shops that is going to be stuck not having DC anymore.
Well, and we talked about the issue with having these types of decisions with these distributors being made by online retailers. And I do think we have to bring up in this situation that people that live in those type of towns, where do you think they're going to be getting their DC from now? From the very people that made the decision to restrict the rules that we're able to distribute to these small towns for retail. Correct. And so ultimately, the retailers that own this company just made themselves a whole lot more money with this policy at the expense of other retailers. And again, why it's a problem to have distribution and retail handled through the same outlets.
Right.
Okay, that all makes sense, but we kind of glossed over how this all started. So why don't you guys tell us? So yesterday you guys woke up with an email.
Yeah. I'm here on the West Coast, and I tend to get up pretty early. So I was up at about 6 o'clock, 6:30. And like every other retailer, I woke up to an email from DC basically saying that UCS, which is the East Coast distributor run by Midtown Comics, will no longer be distributing DC Comics. And basically anybody that was with UCS now has to switch over to Lunar, and Lunar is going to be the sole distributor of DC books.
And Lunar is owned by DCBS Comics.
Correct.
As well.
Correct. Yes.
And this was straight out of left field, right?
Yeah, there was no indication of this coming. So whatever happened must have just happened very abruptly. We don't know if it came from DC or if it came from UCS. We have no, not even rumors that I've even heard of what even happened.
Especially since DC's entire pitch to retailers and the public tried to be, we're pulling out a diamond because it's a monopoly and spreading our business between these two distributors so they can compete with each other. And that was what, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. And now all of a sudden we're back to a monopoly on DC that's now not only a monopoly, but a monopoly distributor and a competition retailer.
Exactly.
Yeah, real fishy moves. Really doesn't.
Exactly.
It's almost, I wish some retailer out there could have predicted that this would turn into being just a giant error on DC's part. If only they knew going in, if there was someone to have told them.
Apparently they don't listen to our podcast.
Yeah, or any retailer, period.
Right. So there was something rather, and I don't think we should read the email on air because obviously that's something between DC and retailers, but just paraphrasing a little bit, there was something at the end that just kind of didn't sit right with me. And it was DC saying that basically thanking UCS for everything they've done during this time of transition. And the way it was worded made it sound like whatever DC has planned has not even yet taken its full form yet. And that UCS was just a necessary means that was just going to be temporary, is the way they made it sound in that paragraph, the way they worded it. And it just hit me weird when I read it. Maybe I'm just putting more into it than there is, but it really sounded like something that said that UCS was just something temporary. They've now kind of gone past that, and they're now moving towards their ultimate goal, is the way it really came across. Am I off base on this, Roger?
I'll be entirely honest. So when I woke up to it, I saw it on the retailer groups, everybody kind of losing their minds about it, read the summary, scoffed, and said, and to be honest with you, I have zero interest in listening to DC's tepid corporate speak BS. They've proven themselves to not care, not be trustable, and be absolute liars. So I don't know why I would listen to their lies or give it the time of day. So I knew it was happening. I laughed at the fact that it's such a train wreck, and I walked away and didn't ever read the email. So I can't tell you as far as the actual wording, if I agree with that statement or not, because I never actually read the full email.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to kind of read between the lines about what they're actually saying and what they actually mean. And
there's been a lot of reading between the lines since the start of this decision, and everything we read through the tea leaves so far has been turned out to be accurate. So I would not be surprised.
Yeah. So as far as where this is heading, or where this is, what exactly is happening as far as whatever shakeup might be coming along, I think it might be a good time for all shops, big and small, to start hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst.
And transitioning our customers onto non-DC titles as best we can.
Yeah, because I think the best being that things kind of work out with Lunar, and it kind of keeps going along, and we get our books, and nothing really changes too much, even though we don't like all this. The worst being, what do we have to do to prepare for a post-DC Comics comic shop?
I think that's inevitable. I don't think that. I think the best case scenario is we prepare for a comic shop where you can only get the top 3 or 4 DC titles rather than no DC titles, and I think that that's the best case scenario.
And you may be right, because all of the decisions that they seem to be making and all the steps that they seem to be taking are benefiting everybody but the comic book shops.
And the consumer. I mean, it's not beneficial to the consumer either.
Sure. But taking the consumer out of that for the moment, you're thinking
frankly, I'd argue it's even non-beneficial to the artists and creators, because we've seen how many of them have had reduced work and lost wages and lost jobs as well. I think the only people that they're benefiting so far is their own bottom lines, which we can't even know for sure if that has been a benefit so far. Frankly, we don't have the numbers to know. And these 2 distributors, that's really the only people I think you could even argue has benefit from this thus far, and it's just starting to unveil.
But as far as their bottom line, or maybe the word I'm looking for here is their end game, I'm still not clear what is their end game, because they are doing everything that seems to be of no benefit to the comic book shop, when they should be basically their main the main hub of who they should be servicing. Saying that you have to hit a certain limit, a certain amount before we'll even ship to you, seems crazy. That's like if you go into the grocery store and say, well, I want eggs, and they say, well, we're not going to sell you eggs unless you buy $500 worth. Well, yeah, I mean, I think people are actually going to buy $500 worth of eggs.
It's a necessity. It's a necessity when you go through this, when you get into where, and this happened, when everybody started to self-distribute back in the 90s and before the crash too, is it's a necessity when you start to thin it out to where there's so little product being wholesaled from one source. Every distributor and every wholesaler in the planet, including Diamond, has minimum order quantities. Otherwise, they're retailers, right? So, there's a reason that we get the discounts. It's basically a bulk ordering discount that we're getting. Sure. So that's not necessarily unprecedented or odd. It's just the fact that you have so little of the market and so few titles that now have to be taken up with that minimum order. And I think that when you go through these kind of situation, it becomes a necessity. And I just think ultimately, I can't say, but it seems like just some opportunism that's happening. As far as their end game, I think it's what we predicted back in the very first episode we recorded, which is there's a bunch of suits in offices saying, hey, we're in the multi-million-dollar movie industry. We're not in the comic book industry. These things are a little laborious, pain in the ass, and they don't make enough money for what we have to put into them and all the effort we make. We can still get the OC, which is the only thing that we value in the long term, from original graphic novels through Barnes and Noble. So why do we have to care about these stupid comic books anyways? They don't care if people read comics. They don't people care if people like comics, because they don't think people liking comics drives movie and aftermarket sales of toys and the items that they make their money off of.
Sadly, I think you're hitting it right on the head there, because the comic shops where all of this sprung from in the first place is now considered an afterthought and ready to be just cut out of the equation.
So let's say that is their end game, and they cut it down to where you get, so presumably there has to be Action Comics, there has to be Detective Comics, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Let's say they cut it down to those 5 for floppies every month, and that's it. And the rest is through OGN and digital. What is the consequence to the resale market?
I don't think it affects Silver and Gold Age much.
No.
I think you actually could see some opportunity for big books in modern to come out that end up becoming long spread, because I think you're going to see print runs drop real low for quite a while on a lot of the books, especially because at least at first, and certainly for at least some point, they're going to try, if they have new characters or new launches or things, they're going to do some physical medium to try and hype those kind of things. So I think there's going to be some sneaky keys in there that end up actually being long-term holding keys because you have them run so low. I think the greater impact is not going to be on your Silver and Gold Age collectors. I think there's a great impact on modern collectors, obviously on shops, and the underrated impact of all this that I don't think people are considering is how big the impact's going to be on artists and writers and creators that are going to see their pay and their work cut dramatically, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely 100% agree. And then as far as the secondary market that you're talking about, Joe, we're the only ones that really care about that, obviously. DC doesn't give two what's about it. They don't care. They don't make money off
nor should they. Nor should they, in all honesty.
They don't, yeah. I think what people don't really realize that if a book gets really hot and starts selling for like 50, 60, $100 on eBay, I don't think they really, if they're not entrenched in collecting in the comic world, I don't think most people realize that Marvel or DC or whatever publisher, they don't make dime one off of that.
No, in fact, they're usually the last ones to know. Usually they find out well after stores and customers. And I've been at Comics Pro events talking to them, and I've had Dan DiDio look in shock when we tell him a book that came out 3 or 4 weeks ago is going for $50 or $60, and he had no clue, because that's not his job. His job is not to track that.
Right. So when I hear people speculating about, oh, they're just doing that so they can drive up the prices on these books on eBay or whatever. No, that's not the case, because they don't make dime one when a book gets hot and starts selling on eBay. So they don't care at all about that. That is not even in their equation one bit.
In fact, the only time I really hear it, the only time I hear it come up with publishers is when they're trying to avoid it. They don't want that. They actively want that not to happen, because that gets in the hands of people that aren't going to crack open the book. They aren't going to read the book, and they're not going to buy issue 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Exactly.
And so they genuinely do not want a high resale market with most publishers. Most publishers try to avoid that, especially your larger publishers.
Exactly.
Okay, what about for the exclusives market? Like you guys were just talking about with your new venture. Do you think this will have any effect on the exclusive covers?
You're not going to see DC covers from us.
Well, okay, not just you. I mean,
I think a lot of I think you've seen a big decrease in DC already from a lot of your exclusive cover producers, and I think that continues. I think that I think the amount that they offer will drop. I don't think they'll offer nearly as many titles for that anyhow, because it doesn't work like we can just call up and say, hey, we're going to do an exclusive cover on this book. Like, they have to offer it for whatever issue we're applying for. So it's publisher cleared before it ever comes with us anyhow. And I don't think they'll offer it on as many titles. I think it'll be at best if retail in general is a side thought, then I don't even call that a side thought. That's going to be below a side thought, No, I definitely don't think you're going to see a lot of that. If you're a variant collector in general, DC is not going to be a very friendly publisher towards what you're doing.
Well, I totally agree with Roger. This has like zero effect or zero hold on what's going on with DC, their distribution, or anything. They don't care about any of this. Like you said, this is even below an afterthought for them.
Yeah, I think this is really simply, we're seeing a large company that looks at comics as nothing more than an IP factory. And this is the result of that. And this is the writing on the wall, the canary in the coal mine. This is, and frankly, I don't think by any means that there's been some rumors and some speculation. I personally don't think by any means that Marvel or Image or any of these other companies are looking at this as a viable market strategy right now. They've all been pretty adamantly against it from the start. I don't think any of the other companies have the same thoughts, but if this should turn out, if you suddenly see DC get super profitable all of a sudden, I could see some suits in some other rooms going, hey, as soon as they did that, they cut off that fat, and now all of a sudden they added to the bottom line. When it comes especially to large companies, if you're talking about Aftershock Comics or I guess I was going to say Valiant, but they're corporately owned. A lot of these smaller, individually and smaller owned Vault Comics and that kind of stuff, you're not going to see that. But with some of your large corporate owns where you have decisions like this being made in boardrooms by non-comic people, I could definitely see how this spreads. I don't think it'll work, so I'm not that concerned about that happening. But should it work, there's definitely that possibility.
All right. So, Eddie, how are we going to see shops react to this? Like, are we going to see an increased focus on pops and magic cards? Like, even more so than we already do? Because honestly, that takes up like probably 70% of my current shop.
For me, pops, no. Magic, yeah. Every shop is different. There is no cookie cutter template for shops.
Very true.
Every single shop has a certain percentage of items that bring in the customers. I know Roger does really, really well with pops over at the Nerd Store. We don't over at Heidi Ho. Pops are ice cold for us. But
I meant more as just other just examples of collectibles. Are we going to see a more collectible focused market?
Diversification, I think, is the better phrase for what you're talking about, Joe.
That's where I'm going with this. You have to diversify if you have a shop. You have to diversify your product, but you also have to figure out which products do well for you so you can start putting more eggs in that basket. I'm not going to put eggs in any pop baskets because the pops just don't do it for me. But I'm definitely going to put more eggs in my Magic the Gathering basket because eventually, and also vintage comics, because that stuff is always going to do well. Even though we can't hold any Magic events right now, we still are selling singles and like crazy. And every 3 months when a new set comes out, we are selling through it like crazy because our Magic community who can't come in and play still want the stuff and they're buying it all. And then they're just taking it home and playing. But eventually when we can have events in the shop again, it's going to be a huge boom for us. And we're going to really jump back to where we were before. So that's a good basket for us to put eggs in and diversify and take some eggs away from DC for sure. I know Roger was talking about cutting out a lot of DC altogether and not hand selling it. And at this point, I'm starting to agree more with that. But I know that right now, we're pretty much cutting back our DC orders to mostly all pull customers only, and the only thing that the only titles that we're going above and beyond are maybe like the hot Batman titles or, stuff like that. 3 Jokers, things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we've cut
all the B, C, and D titles. Yeah. They're not even making it to the wall each week. They're just going straight to pull.
We have officially, as of last week, cut our DC. There was a point when DC was, I think, almost 12 linear feet on our wall, which is 8 foot vertical and 12 feet wide. And I think it was 8 feet wide. I can't remember how much foot, but it was a significant footprint. It's now 1 shelf. It's 1 4-foot shelf. That's the only space we allocate to DC shelf copies. So that's that's a 95% decrease in our footprint that we offer for DC. And what people that listening to understand is in retail, your footprint is your currency. That's like the footprint you give to something is what you provide. That's the service you provide to the manufacturer of that product. So it's my way of voting with my dollar effectively. And that decision actually has worked out really well for us. I stand by that decision for sure. As far as the diversification you talk about, Eddie, yeah, I think this impacts that. I don't think this is that though. I mean, that diversification has been happening. You've seen the comic dungeon stores nearly to go to extinction already. Like this is not where this has not been. It's been a good 10 years now that diversification or die has been the motto in the industry. So do I think this heightens that? Yeah, I think there are certain stores who have hung on as, old school comic dungeon stores that this is going to really hurt disproportionate to others. And they may either have to diversify or die, but I don't think you're going to see some huge industry wide push for diversification that's not already there, because it's just already there.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, we talked about this already in so many earlier shows. We're already past the point where you need to be diversifying, and the new issues that come out every week should only be a small percentage of your actual business at this point, so that if you lose a DC, it's not going to affect your bottom line that much.
Yeah, there's, when we designed my business, when Charles and I designed our business, the thing that we said from the start is we don't want to be beholden to a single company. So we knew what that meant at the time. So what that meant is we could have Diamond go out of business and in single issue comics die, and it wouldn't close us. We could have Wizards of the Coast go out and all Magic go away. That wouldn't close us, and we're there. I mean, we could lose all New Comics. We could lose all Magic the Gathering. We could lose all Pokemon, which is huge for us. We could lose all Funko, which is big for us, because we've diversified so well into every category that, we don't sell as many comics. We're not the top comic store in the state. We're probably not the top Funko store in the state. We're certainly not the top Magic store in the state. But when you have a good amount of all of those things, your total sales end up being as high as anyone that your competition with. And so we felt like we'd rather do all of it well than be perfect at one thing.
Yeah, because if you are beholden to only one or two distributors for all of your product, you're basically at the whim of any dumb decision that they make that could basically tank your business.
I know guys that in the last, not that long have had successful game stores go away because, Magic had 2 or 3 bad sets in a row, and that was 85% of their business. And that killed them, like literally put them out of business, because a person who makes the cards made 2 or 3 sets in a row that fans weren't buying and weren't moving. So you can't tie your wagon that heavily to one other company where the decisions and stuff aren't in your hands. You just can't. Like, if anybody that's out here listening to this thinks of wanting to be a retailer and that's why you listen, is you're that interest, my top recommendation, honestly, especially in this industry more than any other, is understand that aspect. Don't tie your wagon so heavily to something. I don't care how big of a fan you are of it. Don't tag your wagon so heavily to it that your success, that your failure and your success and living and dying is tied to another company in someone else's control.
Yeah, agreed. And, when you are beholden to a particular distributor more so than any other, like you're bringing up Magic, and a bad set comes out, half of our shop really is dependent on the Magic community that we have. If a bad set comes out, though, it doesn't kill us, because we are actively buying all the time.
It hurts. You feel it.
Yeah, we feel it, but we can get through it just fine because we're actively buying so many singles and so many collections that we weather it easily, because we're selling all kinds of, high-end cards, even like a ton of low-end cards out of our cases and out of our TCG player store, that it more than evens us out if a bad set comes out.
So you heard it here first, kids. Don't name your kid Daenerys, because she might burn down King's Landing eventually. All right. So the other news that's going on right now is there's a huge market spike in the secondary market. And I know, Roger, you had some opinions you want to share about the spike that we're seeing.
Yeah, I just think it's been really remarkable. It's, volatility has been part of the secondary collectibles market, no matter what kind of collectible you're in, forever. Like that's a given part of it, right? But the spike that we've seen in the last 4 or 5 months, from what I've seen, and I obviously haven't done this as long as Eddie, so I like his opinion, but it's unprecedented as far as what I've seen. I mean, we're seeing key books that are doubling in price, and these are well-established keys. These are not just some modern where volatility is a much bigger aspect. Things like Amazing Spider-Man 300 comes to mind, and it's not that there was just suddenly a major catastrophe, a major event, a movie announcement, death of a creator or a character or something. Like, there is not some major thing that you can tie this back to, why that specific issue. But we've seen it. I think that's the biggest one. But we've seen it with Hulk 180 and Hulk 181. Those have gone up significantly, and really just across the board, key issues are up, and they're not only up, but they're selling just remarkably quickly. I'm listing things on eBay now and selling them 3 times faster than I used to, and for 3 times more money than I used to. I think it's really been odd. Eddie, have you seen anything like this before? I mean, would you say that this is unprecedented as well?
Exactly. I mean, there is a history of when the economy does bad, when the economy is in a downturn, people do put money into collectibles. And you see that from time to time. Like a lot of the big books like Action Comics #1 or Amazing Fantasy 15, those record-setting numbers that you've seen on those books, those have more than not happened during an economic downturn, because you basically got some guy with a ton of money basically parking it into a big key issue. So that is kind of a common thing, really, actually. But that's happening doesn't quite make sense to me. This is something that's totally new that I've never seen before. I mean, you've got within just a few months, Spider-Man 300 has tripled, quadrupled.
Yeah, I've seen. I mean, 9.8 copies are now selling between $5,300 to $5,500. If you go back to early September, they were $2,800.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. I mean, that's a huge increase in a very short amount of time.
And this is
if you go back to this time last year, they were under 2,000.
Right. And this is across the board. This is not just 9.8 copies. This is all higher grade CGC copies. These are higher grade raw copies. I've even seen, mid-grade raw copies going for way more than they did just a year ago.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And the last copy of Hulk 181 that I had was a nice, very solid mid-grade copy. I'd say about a 6.0, maybe 7.0 at the most, but it had the Marvel value stamp cut out. I put it up in our eBay store, just starting at 99 cents. Wherever it goes is where it goes, and it went for over $2,000
without the stamp.
Yeah, without the stamp. And
that's unreal.
I was
the green 181s.
Shock.
The green 181s have been catching up for the last 2 or 3 years. We've seen,
and the reason why they've been catching up is because it gives people an affordable alternative, and now it's no longer an affordable alternative.
Well, I'm not talking about in sales volume. I'm talking about in price. The value, the price has been catching, but not like that.
That's crazy. Well, and I sold a 181 recently. Now it had the stamp with it, but it was a 4.0 copy, CGC 4.0. And I think it went for, if I remember right, about $2,100, $2,200, right in that range, as well. So again, just for, it's wild. It's stuff that I just never expected. I mean, we've got a lot of books that we've been sitting on just because, frankly, we get trade-ins a lot of times, and it takes a while to get them to CGC, and we're not in a hurry with it. We've had the cash flow, so we haven't needed them, and we've been breaking a lot of that stuff out to sell it right now, just because some of this stuff is so much higher than it was when we purchased it that there's no way for us not to move it at this point.
Yeah. So what's causing this? I have no clue. I can't tell you. I mean, this is even coming during a pandemic at a time where...
well, I think that's the answer to your question. That's my theory anyhow.
Yeah, but also this is coming at a time where most people's unemployment and that extra $600 a week has already run out.
So, yeah, I don't think it's the $600 a week. I think so. If you guys want my my theory on this and what I think on this, and I've talked to Charles, and he thinks basically the same thing, is it's the nature of this recession. So the nature of this recession is twofold. Number one, if you guys follow any, marketplace type, information or podcasts or any of those kind of things, which I'm mildly obsessed with that kind of stuff. One of the things that you know about this particular downturn is that it's extremely unequal as far as how it's affected people. If you're, the people that are affected by this particular downturn tend to be very affected, and that's why the numbers on average are very bad. But a lot of people tend to be virtually unaffected. And a lot of people are not only unaffected, but they have gotten raises due to COVID pay. They've gotten, more hours in a lot of industries. And on top of that, they're sitting around they aren't going on trips. They aren't going to the movies. They aren't eating out. All the things that was taking your money, you're no longer spending it on. So you're making the same, and in many cases more money than you were before. You're not spending it where you would normally spend it. And you're sitting in your house, staring at blank walls, sitting there with nothing to do, sitting on eBay because you're bored, and impulse purchasing. And you also have a situation where you have a lot of mental anguish around the country right now, like on whole. Like it's not a lot of good news. I think everybody's pretty uptight and on end. I think, again, that's been, I think people can relate to that pretty well. And when you have that, that's a recipe for retail therapy. And people are going and saying, hey, that grail I've eyed for 10 years, now is the time, because damn it, I've earned it and I need it. And I think that's what you're saying. I think that's what's driving the markets up specifically is the pandemic. My question, and what I'm going to be interested to see, is whether or not this particular spike, whether it's sustainable and how sustainable it is, and how much of it drops and how much of it remains.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that too, because I have a couple of books that I'm sitting on that are at way over record numbers for what they've ever sold for.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to sell, because I view these books as long-term investments where I'm hoping eventually they'll be in the tens of thousands of dollars over a long period of time versus but I mean, when I see them selling for 3-4 times what I'm or what I paid for them, it's hard not to flip that.
Yeah, and as far as that's concerned, my theory, I think some books will see more of a crash than others. I think Spider-Man 300 as an example, I say this as somebody trying to sell a 9.8 copy right now, so maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, but I think that one's set for more of a crash than most, simply because even though Venom is a well-known character, and I don't think that character is going anywhere, that book's going to be a major key forever. But that was just so heavily printed. I mean, you can ask Eddie, if you have a comic shop, you see that book, and you see it relatively often. It's not that unusual to walk in the door.
Yeah, I've got...
Actually, I just had a thought that I want to share real quick.
Desk.
Right.
I just have a thought that I want to share real quick. Could part of the effect of the 300 be the null effect as well?
No, I don't think that has any effect on it whatsoever. I do think there's probably some impact of the popularity of the current Venom series and what Donny Cates is doing with the character. I think that's causing some relevance to it. But no, I think you look at demographics, okay? The people that have done the best in this particular pandemic are white men in their early 30s to through 40s. Well, who's the big character for that age group? Who were they raised to think is the best? Who's their Batman? It's Venom. That was the guy in the late 80s, early 90s that everyone looked at and said, man, someday I really want that character. And they're the ones with money now. And they're the one. It's the same reason we saw the Bronze Age spike start about 10 years ago, because the people that were raised on Bronze Age all of a sudden had the money. And so you saw everything spike, and that has not gone down despite people's, constantly saying, oh, they're overprinted, so that's going to not be sustainable. It's been sustainable, and it will continue to be. I think it's simply just people are buying stuff, because it's not, I mean, Venom, again, is one, but like, dude, I sold a Conan #1 the other day for twice what I would have sold it for, this time last year. And that's not exactly a character that's super relevant in the millennial generation, so I just think it's simply that you have a lot of people, a very large number of people that are better off financially because of this situation, and they don't have other things that they're competing to put their money into.
You know what?
Eddie?
You make a really good point. And because I can say that, like, for the past few months, I've been doing better on eBay than I've ever been. And a good example is I had a really high grade copy, believe it or not, Silver Age, high grade copy of Fantastic Four. God, is it 19? I believe it was 19. I'd have to look. It's the first appearance of Rama Tut, who later becomes Kang the Conqueror. And I put it up on eBay in my eBay store for a pretty high price, thinking, I don't know if this is ever going to move. But then one morning, everybody woke up to the news, the casting news about Kang for upcoming, MCU appearance, and that book immediately was gone for that price. So, yeah, there's people out there and they have the money, and I think you've got a good point of who they are and what they're doing, Roger.
Well, and the other evidence I think for that is if you look at other collectibles, you're seeing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Funko Pops had a massive spike. The average Funko collection raised 50% in the last 2 months. You saw, I don't know if you've seen, Eddie, what's going on with Pokemon cards, but they're absolutely bonkers. Like, Pokemon's probably seeing a bigger spike than comics have. Especially the original base set Pokemon is just gone. Insane numbers, stuff I never thought that I would see. Base set Charizard going for $500. That's chaos. That's nuts. It wasn't that long ago. It was $60.
Well, and
what was that about? Someone sold a Charizard for $220,000 to the rapper Logic.
Yep, that just happened.
Ugh.
Did you not hear about that, Eddie?
No, I didn't. But I mean, you make a good point, because who grew up playing with those base set Pokemon cards? People obviously
guys my age
and who now are basically working from home, have money, like you said, aren't taking vacations, aren't going out on Friday and Saturday night, so
are getting divorced a lot.
Not me. And now they now have money to spend, and so, like you said, they're online and they're buying back their childhood.
Absolutely, that's definitely got to be a part of it. I agree. I think Roger raises an excellent point about not spending money on vacations, and it's not just vacations. I mean, you're not taking your kids to school, so you're not buying all this new back to school crap. You're not,
you're not buying work clothes because you're on Zoom, so you're saving on your outfits.
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, those all make a lot of sense. So, okay, let's talk about something that makes absolutely no sense to me. Roger, you shared this picture with our group, and I have passed it around, and I've gotten two answers back: market manipulation or newsstand variant. But Ghost Rider 1 Volume 2 sold for $1,300 on eBay this weekend.
Absolutely ridiculous.
No one can make heads or tails of it in any of my comic groups.
That is obviously a book. I mean, that's a book that I put in my 99-cent section all the time. I've never once thought about sending it in to get graded.
Yeah. And again, I think this is I can't come back to it, but I think this is largely generational too. And this is why I don't think that this is a flash in the pan. If you look at, and Eddie, I think you could attest to this too. Who are the guys that hate and rail against variant comics? They're all the old school collectors, right? Everybody that's 45 and up, they don't want to buy variants. They hate your variants. They get mad at you if you try and position a variant because they hate them so much.
Mm-hmm.
Guys my age, they all buy variants. Every collector I have in his 20s and 30s is a variant collector to some extent or another. Literally every single one that I can think of.
The only time I could ever sell a variant cover to a guy, 40s, 50s and up, the old collectors, is if it's a variant cover that homages a classic Silver Age cover. Then they get, they go, ooh, and then they buy it.
Yep. Or if it's an unreleased from a Silver Age artist, like if they pull, an unpublished Kirby or something out for a
the
cover.
Like the Ditko 800.
Like the Ditko, yeah. That's another one, yeah. Those ones, there's some appeal, but even then, a lot of times they still shrug them off. And I think what you're seeing is really what newsstand variations are is they're that age of comics. That's their version of a variant cover. these people, the people that have the money and are driving the market now, are the people who have been raised on variant covers. They've known variant covers. They've sought after variant covers. They have the variant cover completionist mentality. And so they see those variants and they're willing to pay large amounts of money in difference for these market variations. And especially when you see, books like, what's the first Jason Todd, I think it is, that has that really limited newsstand variant that's really rare, where it goes for just insane amounts of money.
It's the first appearance of Jason Todd in costume as Robin, and it is
there's 12 of the newsstand copy or something that's available.
Yeah,
like that.
It's pumped up. It's into the mid 40s, and that book's actually dropped drastically over the last few years. But
for a long time there, that book was really expensive, and so
yeah.
And I'll give you another example of where I've seen this. So the Star Wars 35-cent variant has been worth a ton of money forever, right? This is not news. But until relatively recently, other Canadian variants did not catch much of a premium. I remember 5 years ago, Secret Wars 8 has a Canadian variant that's a $1 variant. They were selling for the same price. I literally bought one for the same price that I was buying the other ones for. That variant's now 5 times what a regular American, copy of Secret Wars number 8 goes for. Because I think people started realizing, hey, if I'm going to pay a premium for this Star Wars, why wouldn't I pay it for this? And I think that's a seller-driven marketplace correction, but buyers had to buy into it for it to occur. And I think that's what you're seeing right now with both those foreign variants as well as Newsstand. I think Newsstand was slightly behind the foreign variants, but I just think you see sellers going, hey, you know what? I see this Newsstand 20 times less. Someone will pay a premium for that. Let's start to advertise this that way. Advertise it at a higher dollar because, hey, I'm the only one who's got one. So if you want it, you're going to pay what I ask. And eventually that caught on, and you started getting people who seek after a Newsstand, see it as a higher value, and try to seek them out.
I think that makes sense. The Ghost Rider still makes no sense to me, though. Whatsoever.
No, it doesn't make sense to me either. I'm not going to lie. Despite everything I just said, that's bonkers.
I mean, it must be. Honestly, I think it's probably a market manipulation. I think what you're going to see in
certainly an outlier. There's no way it's sustainable.
Well, I think what you're going to see is that book go up in a lot of groups.
Probably
on social media that either deal in the more luck-based procurement of comics, and or groups that are based on
in the age of internet sales, market manipulation is not tough to pull off with a small investment. So I could definitely see that being the case. That being said, it only takes 2 buyers to make things go for way more than they projected. The cover for Amazing Spider-Man, I think I don't want to say it's 360 something. It's the McFarlane cover where Spider-Man's punching the Hulk. You know that one I'm talking about?
Yeah. It's an earlier issue, like 320.
Yeah, it's in
some.
I think Bagley took over after McFarlane, I think.
So it would have been pre-360. Anyways, that is, up until relatively recently, one of the most expensive covers ever sold. And I talked to the guy who actually ran the auction for that cover, and he goes, look, we projected it as a $40,000 cover simply because it was McFarlane. This was 5-6 years back that this sold. And he said, but we got 2 guys that really wanted it. Just for whatever reason, that was the cover they wanted, and they both had money, and that thing ended up going for almost $400,000 when they projected around 40. And so that's 10 times what the experts projected this would go to. So I mean, he was quick to say, like, hey, if you have anything that's unusual, especially if it's one of a kind, you wait to find the buyers, because somebody out there is going to pay a premium for that. You just give it the time.
And this is a really nice segue into something I just want to touch briefly on. A lot of artists are hurting right now because there's no cons. And the fact of the matter is, they just don't make enough off of working in the industry to support themselves. So OA is a really good place to park your money right now, in my opinion. Things are going for less than they normally do, especially on modern stuff. And I think what you'll see is, if you buy into modern stuff and hold on to it, especially now where it's going for like like some of it's going for like half to a third of what it normally goes for. And I think it's a good place to put some money in and now, and I think you'll see a very good return on it as things start to normalize and later on going forward. But
The
yeah,
same
support
can be-
your artists. Buy commission some sketch covers if they see them online, or if you see them selling their original art. Now is a good time to buy it.
Yeah, and make sure it's not just the well-known artists, but also the up-and-comers, because that's how they survive.
Yeah, or honestly, also don't forget the legendary creators.
Yes, also true.
Yeah, I was looking at a website just earlier today where you can get on the commission list for artists like Sal Buscema, Ron Friends, and of all people, and I'm going to get something from her, Ramona Fredone.
Dude, I saw that one the other day, and I am so tempted. So tempted. Her work is gorgeous.
Yes, you can get a 9x12 full body character, any character you want, penciled, inked, and colored from her, $250.
We're going to wrap things up here with a little history lesson from Eddie on the history of newsstand comics versus direct market. So I'm going to let Eddie take this away.
So gather around, kiddies. I'm going to tell you a little story. What we were talking about earlier regarding newsstand variants, what we mean when we say that are a lot of the books that came out in the 80s and early 90s. You would get one of two ways, like especially with Marvel. You've probably noticed if you're a collector, you would get the same issue, same cover, same everything, but on the bottom in the white box, you would see one version would have a barcode and one version would have a big Spidey head on it. And then people would think, well, what's the difference between the two? Is one a reprint? Is what's going on? It's because they were distributed to two different markets. The one with the barcode, that is the newsstand edition cover. The one with the Spidey head is the direct market cover. So the newsstand copies, those are the ones that you would actually find at newsstands or on your spinner rack at the liquor store or convenience store, that kind of thing. The one with the Spidey head, that's the direct market cover. That's the direct market version. That's what you would find in comic book shops. Well, so why do they have two different things? Well, when comics started out, obviously there were no comic shops. The direct market didn't really actually start until the 70s, but comics were coming out since the late 30s. And they were sold in newsstands. Well, for the longest time, from the very beginning, newsstands had full returnability. They were able to return all of the unsold comics back to the distributor. Now,
which is how it works in the magazine market. When you go to a bookstore, they order everything. And books, magazines, they order everything because all of that is returnable. For comic shops, though, that's not the case. We can't return the stuff that we order. All those comics that we get, they end up going into the back issue bins or the 99-cent bins because we can't return those. So you've got... Or eternally stuck in our back rooms.
Or piling up, yes, in our storage units. But the differentiation here is that newsstands were able to, and are still able to, return their stock as opposed to comic shops who can't. Well, when the direct market started to take hold and comic shops started to spring up, they kind of got around this, not being able to return their stock by partnering up, buddying up with newsstands that they would pawn all of their unsold inventory to and have them return it for them. Now, when distributors and Marvel and DC, when they got wind of this, they realized the way to stop this was to make a differentiation between the covers so that there wouldn't be a confusion and the stock that was going to the direct market wouldn't get returned. Therefore, you had the newsstand going with covers that had the barcode in the white box on the bottom left corner. And then you had the comic shops getting stuck with the little Spidey head if it was Marvel, or if it was DC, it had like a little Batman thing on it, or for a while they had like a little white box that said comics aren't just for kids, or little things like that. So there was a very clear delineation between the copies that were sold at the newsstands and the copies that were sold at your comic shops. And it was all because retailers tried to pull one over on the distributor. And the distributor had to basically put the kibosh on it. And then as far as newsstand copies, like we talked about, going for more money, as the direct market began to take more and more of hold of the comic market, newsstands started to become less and less, going out of business or stop carrying comics, so that there were less newsstand versions of comics printed than the direct market. So they became a little more scarce. So collectors began to put this, or get this idea in their head, that those were more rare because they had the barcode. So there ends the lesson.
And because they were more scarce, especially in a good condition.
Yeah, they were more scarce in good condition and high grade, because at a newsstand, people were more rough with the magazines that they would pick up, and even just the newsstand owners, the way they would stock stuff, they weren't thinking about collectability or it being worth money. They were just throwing the stuff out there, and like we had said earlier in the pre-show, they would come bundled with the plastic strips, so that would cut into the spines and the edges and kind of downgrade the conditions of the books.
So real quick, I have a comic urban legend that I've heard around the social media. That is that the concept of the newsstand variant was another one that has the Mile High's fingerprints all over it, and that Chuck and Mile High Comics were the first to push the idea of the newsstand variant. And so the idea is that initially the newsstands that were more sought after were the high grade ones. And it wasn't that all yes, there's probably less newsstands out there, but mid grade or low grade ones were considered the same as the direct ones. It was the high grade newsstand that was desirable because it was so rare, because of the way they were handled, because of the way they were shipped, and because of who the market was. A newsstand is just not directed at a collector as much as a direct book was at the time. And now that's flipped. But that flip where it became all newsstand was really thanks to Chuck and Mile High. And it's just another place in the industry where you can see Chuck's fingerprints all over the last 30, 40 years.
In theory, we don't know if this is true.
This is an urban legend, as I said. It's something that I have heard around, a tale that I have heard passed around the social media over the years. But I find it very interesting. I like the idea that it makes, because the whole variant, the direct UPC variant, newsstand UPC variant, like seeing them as a variant kind of rubs me the wrong way. And it just makes so much more sense to me that if they were in high grade, then they would have more value versus the low grade and mid grade that you see now are still considered more valuable, even though it just doesn't make as much sense to me.
It doesn't make sense. And whether it happened organic or whether it was engineered, it's something that's here to stay, because I can sell a newsstand edition of a hot book, a key issue, for way, way more than I can the direct market version. Something like first appearance of Gambit. Does Spidey 300 have a newsstand edition as well?
It does.
Yeah, see?
Does it?
Yeah. So I can speak from experience that hot books like that from the 80s and early 90s, I can sell them for in some cases, even almost close to double.
Oh, you can go way more than double with a lot of cases.
On some of them, yes. But like the last one that I sold for more than I should have was a copy of X-Men 266, First Gambit, and it was the newsstand version. And I put an outrageous price on it, thinking that it's not going to sell for more than double what the direct edition should, but it did within days. So this whole newsstand variant thing, I think, is here to stay.
Oh, I don't think it's going anywhere either. It's interesting to think that it's a market. It might, like, in part is a market manipulation, but it started organically. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, market manipulation. I think people really misunderstand how much sellers, especially multiple and larger sellers, can impact markets on things. They can really set the tone. I mean, in both a macro and a micro level. I know, for me and Eddie, I'm sure you do some of this too. Like, there's decisions we make in our store that we'll say, well, we're going to train our customers to want this. We're going to train our customers to want this policy this way, or this item this way, or those kind of things. We're going to train them how to collect this way, or those kind of things. And it's not that it's not a manipulation so much. It's just that we have a policy that we need to in place, and we need to sell it to somebody, so we do that. And that can make impacts within our store, where some things in our store that work well for us, we tell other retailers, and they think we're insane because they say that would never work with their client base, because we trained our client base that way.
Well, you can make that argument about marketing in general, because
Absolutely.
So many companies, like Apple is a perfect example. They're
probably the masters of it.
They're not creating products to fill a need. They're creating the need. So
Yep, exactly. Yep, that's exactly what they're doing.
It really, in this day and age, that's just the way marketing is.
All right. Well, on that note, I think that's going to wrap things up for us this week. Thank you for listening. Please go on to, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please go and rate us 5-star. If you're listening on other services, also, if they have a rating system, please go and give us a 5-star rating. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram under comics or Tales_comics. And you can also find us on Facebook. Come join our Facebook group. We're always looking for feedback. We want to hear what you think of the show, what you want to see change, what you want to see stay the same. And
give us ideas of things to talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you have questions, please ask them. We are readily available on social media. You can direct message us through Twitter or comment in the Facebook group or on our Facebook page. There are 2 pages for the show on Facebook. So
just don't talk to me directly, because I'll just give you funny looks and think you're weird.
And Roger doesn't mean that. Actually, harass him as much as you can. Find his personal Instagram. Find his personal Facebook. No, don't harass people. Don't internet stalk them. That's not okay. And don't dox us either, please.
You can internet stalk me.
You can dox me. I don't have a boss. I don't care.
Yeah, you can internet stalk me. I'm lonely.
Hey, I did have one other small story I wanted, if we have time for it.
Go for it.
Out there. So I wanted to just give a shout out to a very well-known comic creator and artist, but one of the guys that I think is kind of unsung is one of the good guys, which is Adi Granov. So for those who aren't aware, there's a number of artists who do other art than, they'll do comic art, but they do also do a lot of other things. And one of the things Adi Granov does is he does concert posters specifically for the band Tool. And he had a release of a number of his artwork Tool posters that he let go a couple days ago. They're quite expensive posters, and he released them for current market value, which was about $1,000 per poster. And he got some flack from some people about the fact that he was selling it at market value and not giving discounts and those kind of things. And frankly, some of them were awful mean and kind of inappropriate. And he kept his level head, tried to talk to them. Most of them just weren't listening to it. So his reaction to this was not to, he had talked at one point about possibly no longer signing at shows because people were taking advantage of that system, saying that they wouldn't buy a signed print from him since they could just buy one cheaper and have it signed for free and those kind of things, and so on and so forth. And instead of that, what he did is he came out and he took everybody who made a positive comment and a supportive comment of him, and he chose the 3 of them randomly to get that free $1,000 poster for each of them. And so he highlighted and rewarded those who were positive and those who were nice, with these posters that easily sold out, by the way, at that price. And I just thought that was the perfect way in the age of internet trolls to kind of deal with that kind of situation. So I wanted to kind of shout him out and commend him for that.
Nice. And those are prints or original art pieces?
No, those are prints. Those are concert posters. They're limited concert posters.
Wow. But yeah, no, don't be a jerk and support artists because they are really struggling right now. Their main source of revenue has been taken away. So, reach out to them and figure out a way you can put some money in their pockets if you can. And they will probably reciprocate with something that will probably appreciate and value and be a good investment for you.
Yeah, hopefully. Here. And if not, it looks awesome. So who cares?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it'll be something you love. And go to Collectors and order some original art from Eddie. He has some of the coolest pieces you will find on the internet at the most reasonable price I've ever seen for full pieces, full page.
Yeah, your original art prices are kind of nuts.
You think so?
So take advantage of it before he figures out what he has and raises the price.
Well, I can raise the price, but they'll sell just as well as they're selling now, which is not much at all. But hey,
well, yeah, but not much at all at double the price. It's still double the not much.
Yeah, and it's more impressive. But yeah, go to collectorscomic.com and check out my webcomic and also my originals. My original comic strips are there too.
I have one hanging on my wall right now, and I love it.
Thank you.
It's awesome. So, all right. That's going to wrap things up for this week. Thank you for taking a peek behind the counter, and we will see you soon.
Bye-bye.
This show is part of the Geek Nerd Network. Find more shows like it at geeknerdnetwork.com. This is Jen.
Somewhere in a movie studio corporate boardroom. Okay, pitch me something good, see?
All right, there's a war. It's in the stars. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away?
That would never work. Next.
All right. So there's an alcoholic tech billionaire, and he's captured by terrorists, builds himself a robot suit to escape, then goes on adventures saving the world with Norse gods and unfrozen World War II superhero.
Boo. Next.
All right. This unknown boxer from Philly takes on the champ. Inspirational sports movie.
Not woke enough.
Okay. How about a podcast about movie franchises, how they get made, and whether the movies hold up or not?
Go on.
And we review the movies and talk about them?
I can put that on a lunchbox, and we'll call it Kiss Your Franchise Goodbye. It's the best idea I ever had.
I'm Mark.
And I'm Brooke.
And I'm Andy. Subscribe to Kiss Your Franchise Goodbye on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, or wherever you're listening now.
Join us every week along with special guests to discuss some of our favorite movie franchises and why the world seems to revolve around them.
Through November, we're discussing the films surrounding James Bond in a miniseries we're calling On Her Majesty's Secret Podcast.
Not just Bond, also Bond-adjacent movies like Austin Powers, Top Secret, unofficial Rogue Bond movies.
Atomic Blonde, The Rock. And some of these will be exclusive to GNN Network subscribers.
Join us with new episodes at the beginning of most weeks, barring any problems with our spy gear.
You expect me to podcast?
No, Bond. I expect you to...
Kiss your franchise goodbye.